It's like danger music. Good morning. Welcome to LifeMark Crossing. My name's Ross. I am, again, absolutely delighted that you've made it a point to be here with us this morning. If you know Laura and myself, you know that we have a couple of dogs. Honestly, I feel like I learned so much from watching our dogs. I have, to this point, and I will attempt to continue, been actually resisting putting together an entire series based on things that I've learned about us and God through our dogs. It's really clever, but I know it's weird to you who aren't dog people, but I think it's weird that you're not dog people. But I'll still continue. I will at least attempt to continue to resist that. But I learned so much by watching our dogs. And about a year ago, just a little over a year ago, we'd never done this before, and it was a mistake, but we got a brand new little 9-week-old puppy, a little mini golden doodle named Bailey. And so, of course, I've learned a lot of different things by watching her. And when we got her, we already had a dog. And so, of course, one of the things that meant was we had a lot of dog toys, balls, stuffies, chews, all those things. But then you add a 9-week puppy who then very quickly goes through a couple more puppy stages. And what happens is you end up with a whole lot more balls and stuffies and chews, and to the point where if we live at 7 or 10 days without picking up, and then you go pick up everything on the floor and the sofa and the deck and the patio and the yard, we'll be well into the 20s in terms of things that we've picked up and put away. And one of the things that Bailey loves to do, and it's really very cute, I have a little 30-second clip here that hopefully you'll enjoy, even if you don't enjoy the message, is she'll have a little ball on the floor and she'll bat it with her paws like she's playing soccer, but she'll also have a stuffy in her mouth that she'll use like a hockey goalie stick. And the goal is, I think, always to get it to go down the stairs, but she doesn't have super refined ball skills, so sometimes it just kind of goes whatever, and it looks a lot like this. And you see, one thing you notice is that we've done some things, by we, of course, I mean my wife Laura, has done some things to try and keep the balls from going under the chair and under the couch and under places where it'll be inaccessible to her. And she has pretty good success. Actually, she almost defeats it here in a moment. Like, there it goes, and she's going to push it under. Nope, okay, she got it out. And here we go, and now there will be another big win where hey, it works great, the ball bounces right off, and is that adorable or what? But that's what she does. But inevitably, of course, always the ball goes somewhere where she can't get it. And when that happens, it's hilarious and pathetic. She will just lay down and make the most pathetic sounds you have ever heard for several minutes. And she'll lay there and she'll just paw and paw and paw, even though she knows she can't get it, or occasionally just thinks she can't get to it if it's on the other side of the vent. Is that the cutest thing? Come on. And I'm sitting there this whole time, though. If you just look around anywhere else in the house, here's what you find. Like, Bailey, you have so many balls. Look, there's orange ball, and there's yellow ball, and there's blue ball, so you don't have red ball right now, so that got knocked under whatever. It's okay. You don't have a poverty of balls. You have more balls than you even have the capacity to enjoy. Bailey, you have extra. And so if you even on some level were able to lose or get rid of all of those, we just buy you more. You don't have anything to worry about with the balls. But if you've ever tried to rationalize with a puppy, it's a little bit of an uphill battle, and the point, you're never really sure if it gets through. And so I don't think Bailey would see herself with her toys and her balls as greedy, because she's a dog, and I don't think she even understands the concept. I think she's just a dog living her dog life. But she does not have a poverty of balls. She has extra. She has so many balls. And so I try to tell her that, but she does not understand. She just sits and mourns the one ball that she has temporarily lost. And there's something about greed that makes it very, very difficult for us to see in our own hearts the same way that I think I look at Bailey, and what I see with her and her balls is really kind of a picture of all of us. And we don't really believe this, but I think this is true. And I think there's a couple reasons why it's difficult to see in our own hearts. Number one is that greed has a way, like so many different things, of camouflaging itself as something that is not a vice, but is in fact a virtue and is really a good thing. And it's very easy to convince ourselves that this is the case. I'm not greedy. I'm just a saver. Isn't it good to save? I want to be taken care of through an uncertain future. I don't want to be a burden on society or my children when I'm old. I've heard a good message about how saving is, in fact, good biblical wisdom. That's a good thing. I'm not greedy. I'm a planner. And if you are a planner, you can tell tales of times when things really went badly because somebody didn't plan enough. And that somebody is your spouse, isn't it? Or maybe there were some times where your planning saved the day. It's good to be a planner, and it is. But there's something that's very, very difficult to find the line in between the truly legitimately good things like saving and planning, and then a very ugly thing like greed. And I know this seems like a message that I shouldn't really have to preach because it's not relevant to any one of you, because I know none of us struggle with greed. Here's why I know that, is because I've never met anybody who has ever had any issue with greed at all. Never. In my years of pastoring, I've heard all sorts of things. Everything that you would think, and probably a couple things that you wouldn't think of. Not once have I ever gotten a message or had somebody come in to talk to me and say, Ross, I tend to struggle with greed. That has never, ever happened. So what do you think that means? Do you think that means that as individuals and as a society, we have eradicated greed from our world and our lives and our hearts? No, nobody thinks that. We all think two things. We all believe these. Number one, there's a lot of greed out there. It's real and it's terrible, and it has people in its clutches. So many people. But also, there's no greed in here. It's all out there. It's all everybody else, and it's not me. And I think there are a couple of reasons why we all believe that. One of those is that, as I've just said, it's difficult to see in our hearts. The other is I think we categorically misunderstand greed as an economic issue or a cash issue. Greed that's not for me. That's for people who are wealthy. That's for people who have more than me, and really probably a lot more than me, because even I'm trying to have a little more than me, but not too much, right? Not a whole lot more, because then those people, those are the ones who are greedy if you have a whole lot more than I do. And so here's the truth that we might not like, is greed is not a financial issue or a cash issue. It is a heart issue. That's why it's in this series, because you know that somebody who has money and then loses it, they don't all of a sudden become less greedy. And you also know that having more money does not necessarily make somebody more greedy, because it's a heart issue and not a finance issue. And it's very, very interesting. I think we don't realize, a lot of us will be familiar with this verse, but I think a lot of us don't realize how interesting this is. But here's what Jesus says about greed in Luke chapter 12. He says, beware, guard against every kind of greed. Life is not measured by how much you own. And here's what I think happens to most of us when we see this verse, is that we see that second part and we say, yes, I agree with you, Jesus. Absolutely, we are on the same page here. Life is not measured by how much you own. That's crass materialism. We all know that doesn't deliver. It's not what life is about. And then, by virtue of agreeing with the second part, we immediately ignore and do the opposite of the first part. Instead of doing what he says and then guarding against greed and guarding our hearts, like we started looking at with this series a couple weeks ago, right, from Proverbs 4, above all, guard your heart because it determines the course of your life. We then, because we agree with Jesus, we ignore Jesus and immediately take down any guard that we have against greed. Is that not pretty close to what happens? Even ignoring the fact, and this isn't the message for today, but ignoring the fact that we all live in the richest society in the history of the world. I mean, my goodness, compared to the people that Jesus was actually directly speaking to, we all say that, okay, right, but greed, like that's for somebody else. Nobody thinks that Jesus means them, right? Nobody here thinks that that means you. And so here, just sort of to start, A couple things that very sort of real life things. And if these describe you, then these might be a red flag that there may be some greed in our hearts. Number one, you talk or worry a lot about money. And I fully realize that living in this world can sometimes be a struggle. I'm not saying that it isn't or can't be or shouldn't be. What I am saying is that if it is, don't let that then mean to not guard your heart, like Jesus is saying, to guard against greed. All right? If you find it hard to give cheerfully, that might be a sign of some greed in our heart. You get upset over small amounts of money. I know this is another thing that we believe is a virtue and not a vice. Like, why are you so upset over $3? Well, it's not the $3, it's the principle of the matter. I'm not upset because I'm a bad, greedy person. I'm upset because I'm a good, principled person. Like, okay, but just forget about it. It's $3. It's insignificant. Do you struggle to forgive debts from long ago? Probably we've all had some situation where we loaned money to someone a long time ago and it never got paid back, and maybe we still remember that, but how much have we forgiven that? Or does it still kind of bother us? Well, because it's the principle of the matter. Oh, maybe, or maybe there's a little bit of greed in your heart, or this is maybe the most important, most telling one. Are you rarely content and feel like you're always wanting new or better or more? And when you get it, very shortly thereafter, what happens is you decide that, again, you need newer or better or more. And you guys, I know greed is such an ugly word. Nobody wants to think that we have any greed in our hearts, but it really is, so all the more reason to, look, you guys, let's just face it and deal with it, and if it's there, well, then let's get it out. It's a good idea. So the very next verse, right after Jesus tells us to guard against greed, here's what he goes into. Here's what he says. He says, then he told them a story. A rich man had a fertile farm that produced fine crops. He said to himself, what should I do? I don't have room for all my crops. And whether or not we like to think of it, I think this really is a picture of every one of us. This is Bailey with so many balls that she isn't even able to play with all of them. And I'm not saying that you necessarily talk to yourself the same way that this guy talks to himself, which I think is one of the most fantastic things in all of Scripture, honestly. But every one of us, we have some extra. I know sometimes it feels like we don't. And I know I'm not saying that it can't be difficult to live in, this is a very expensive society we live in. Certainly I recognize that. I'm not saying that things can't be a struggle. But if you have ever bought, I shouldn't, maybe not if you have ever, but if you ever buy a cup of coffee or a soda or a slushie that costs more than a lot of people make in a day, you might have some extra. If you pay for TV or streaming service because you have so much free time that it costs you money, you have some extra. Oh my goodness, if you pay to not have ads on that streaming service or on an app on your phone, you have some extra. If you have your own bedroom and there aren't roommates or another couple or two living in that with you, you have some extra. Listen, I know this is me too. I love a cold slushie on a hot day. I don't want you sleeping in my bedroom, right? But in fact, we have so much extra that if it were to come to that, our house actually has, listen to this, a spare bedroom. And that's not even strange. That's maybe not everybody, but that's very, very normal. None of you are amazed that, especially since it's just Laura and I in the house, that there's a spare bedroom. But every one of us, we have some extra. And so this guy does a great thing. He asks a great question. He says, what should I do with my extra? It's a great question. Here's where he doesn't do as well as he could, though, is you have to ask the right question to the right person. And that's where maybe he gets a little off track, because who does he ask? You see, well, he asks himself. Have you ever asked this question? Probably a lot of us haven't. Have you ever asked, what should I do with my extra? But don't ask yourself or don't ask a financial advisor. What if we asked God what to do with my extra? And so, if you know, I've been here for about 3 years, maybe once before we've done this, maybe not at all. I don't know, because I hate this. I hate like that we're all going to say this together or turn to your neighbor and say something. But we're going to do it today. We're all in what we're going to ask God, what should I do with my extra? But let me just tell you that here's what I hate even worse than doing this is every single time, the first time, half the people kind of mumble it, and so then they're like, oh, we can do better than that, and then you have to do it again. So let's just do it right the first time, and then we'll move on. We're going to go on 3. I count fast. Here we go. 1, 2, 3. God, what should I do with my extra? Yes. Okay, I'm glad that it works. Thank you. Now we can keep going. And I know some of us, we still really aren't sure that we have extra, but what about the times, especially if you don't feel like you do, what about the times when you really felt like you did not have enough? What did you do then? Here's what I hope you did, is I hope you went to God. And you said, God, I've done everything I can, but right now I really don't have enough. I need your provision. Aren't you supposed to be taking care of me and providing for me and all these things? And so, God, I really need for you to provide for me. And then what happens is there comes some provision. And here's what I hope you did, is I hope you immediately, I know it's so easy when that happens, you just say, oh, hey, things worked out. But here's what I hope you did, is that you didn't do that. You went back to God. You said, oh, God, thank you so much. I didn't have enough, and it didn't look like there was any way, and then you made a way and you provided. Thank you so much for providing me when I didn't have enough. I hope that's what you do. And so if we have no problem going to God when we feel like we have not enough, isn't it just as good of an idea to go to God when He has provided for us enough, and then maybe even enough plus some? And so this is, of course, though, the opposite of what our friend here did. He asked himself what he should do with his extra, and so, of course, he gets a particular answer. He said, well, I know. I'll tear down my barns and build bigger ones. Then I'll have room enough to store all of my wheat and other goods, and I'll sit back and say to myself, and this is the part that I really love, as he talks to his hypothetical future self, talking to his hypothetical future self, and calls himself my friend. I just think that's fantastic. But he says, I will say to myself, my friend, you have enough stored away for years to come. Now take it easy, eat, drink, and be merry. And so, since most of us ask ourselves what to do with our extra, that kind of assumes then that it's for us, and so this is really the answer that we all come up with, is build bigger barns, find some way to be able to have or hold on to or consume or do whatever with whatever my extra is. Well, God's perspective, of course, is a little bit different from that. God said to him, you fool. No, you're going to die this very night, then who will get everything you worked for? Obvious answer, someone else. And then this is the end of the story. So Jesus, now the story's done, and he just kind of recaps it, and he says, he agrees. He says, yes, a person is a fool to store up earthly wealth, greed, but not have a rich relationship with God. I mean, you think about it for just a minute. Everything that we think or we feel like we own or possess, if it isn't going to just get rotten or expire or break or whatever, it will sooner or later go to someone else. It's really just a matter of how and when. And so, since we're already halfway toward being this guy, how can we avoid being this short-sighted fool who dies rich and then just loses everything? Well, the good answer, or the good news is there's an answer. It's really very simple. The bad news is that if your heart struggles a little bit with greed, then you probably aren't going to like it, and you're going to cringe when you hear this. If you don't struggle with greed, then you'll probably be very happy to see this, because here's the simple answer, is the cure for greed in your heart is generosity. It's just kind of a medium-sized word for giving stuff away, which is what we're about to see here. Now tell me if this won't be the exact polar opposite of the rich guy who dies rich and loses everything Anyway, look at this. This isn't a story, but this is just a couple of verses from what we call 2 Corinthians chapter 9, and it's so good. First of all, it says, don't give reluctantly or in response to pressure. I'm so glad that it says that. I love that. In fact, it says God loves a person who gives cheerfully, which sounds like somebody who has very much broken the power of greed in their heart, doesn't it? And here's what it says. It says, and then God will generously provide all you need, which sounds good. In fact, then you will always have everything you need. Look, and plenty left over. Good news. God, what should I do with my extra that I have now left over from what you've provided for me? To share with others. That's what happens when there's the answer to our question that you all very helpfully and appropriately asked. I love that. Of God, what do I do with my extra? And when God provides for them everything they need and extra, with the realization that it's all going to go to somebody else eventually anyway, he does really the only reasonable thing and shares with others, and in the process absolutely crushes the power of greed in their heart. I know a lot of you are still stuck on, well, I'd love to give cheerfully. I'd love to give generously. And I absolutely would if I just had more to give from. Then it wouldn't be hard at all. As I know that is so seductive, it is just not true. It is a lie. I think I've mentioned this before, but it was so good. I sat one day in a conference and heard a very wealthy man who is well known for his generosity and extraordinary giving, and he dropped an incredible gem. He said, he looked out at us and he said, you don't have to be wealthy to be generous. And we all liked the sound of that, but we knew there was a but coming. Here's what he said. You don't have to be wealthy to be generous, but you know what you do have to be? Generous. Right? Of course, you have to be generous. And there is no evidence that having more makes a person more generous. In fact, it's the people, again, with more that you believe are the greedy people. So the idea that you will be more generous once you have more, you know that just doesn't happen, that just doesn't work. You know this, that wanting more and then having more does not breed contentment and generosity. Wanting more and then having more breeds wanting more. So if you aren't generous now with what you have, with where you are right now, there is no reason to believe that you'll become more generous if you do end up finding yourself in a better financial situation. But, and now here's the good part, you guys, honestly, I feel like this should be really like one of the best message endings that I'm really kind of excited about. I feel like this ends really positively, is here's what you can do, is from right where you are right now, if you guard your heart, like Proverbs and Jesus say, and guard against greed by cultivating a heart of generosity, then guess what? Now, if you do end up finding yourself in a better or more advantageous financial position, what happens now? Now you still do carry your beautiful, generous, giving heart, and you have that and an abundance with it. That is a wonderful, beautiful place to be. That's really about the ideal, isn't it? You guys, you know what would be fun? Tell me if this wouldn't be fun, or if this at least doesn't sound like the heart that you would like to have or would like to have more of. Is just say for a moment, let's just all imagine what happens in our minds and in our hearts if we come into a large amount of money. And I'm not really a proponent of playing the lottery, so we'll just say that you have some third cousin, second removed that you never even knew about or heard of until one day you get a phone call from an estate lawyer or a letter in the mail, and I don't even know how this works. But now all of a sudden, you've inherited a big pile of cash. What's your first thought when that happens? And since I just put that thought into your mind, what was your first thought? Wouldn't it be fun if your first thought was, oh, this is amazing? We're going to be able to do so much and help so many people with this. I know a couple people who I can really help now change their lives. There's some organizations that are already changing lives. They'll be able to do so much more. And I'm going to be able to be a part of this. This is so much fun. Wouldn't that be great if that was your first thought? Because here's probably what most people's first thought is everybody thinks that they would love to and enjoy being very generous if they all of a sudden have much more money than they've ever had before. Probably none of us have ever had a lot more money than we have right now. And so the thought of spending whatever 20 times our current income is, like, we don't even know how we would do that. And so, of course, we think it would be easy to be generous with how this tremendous amount of money that we would have left over, right? And so if that's you, I don't think that makes you generous. I think that makes you like everybody else. You say, well, yeah, I give away a lot. But, of course, after I, got a different house and a new car and, maybe a couple fishing boats or whatever, just a couple other nice things. That doesn't make you generous. That makes you like everybody else. Wouldn't you rather be the first person whose first thought would be, before the house and the car and the boat, this is going to be so much fun to see what God and I can do with this together. Several years ago, most of you know that we were living in New England, and I was a pastor there, and their church was called Summit Church. And dreams are weird, so I don't remember a lot of the details or how this happened, but somehow in my dream, Laura actually came into $20 million. And my first thought in the dream was, right off the top, that's $2 million to Summit Church. And this isn't a tithing message. I'm not bringing this back to you, like, you give us all your money. That's not what this is at all. All I'm saying is that this is what happened in my dream. Now, I don't know how I would respond in reality, although I'm willing to find out. But you guys, listen, I'm not any different from any of you, right? I've been preaching this to myself all week, right? So again, you don't worry about me, you worry about your own self. But even, I want that dream to come true. And what I don't mean is inheriting and coming into $20 million. Realistically, there's no chance of that. We don't have family like that. I can't make the $20 million happen. But I can work toward making that heart happen. Right? And when I die, and they look into my black box, they can see not a heart that was ruled by ugliness and greed, but a heart that broke the power of greed with the heart-healthy habit of generosity. Right? I can take steps toward that. And so can you if you want to. You don't even have to be wealthy to be generous. You just have to be generous. Okay, let's pray. Father, thank you so much that you have provided for us, every one of us here, so much more than we really recognize or realize. I know maybe our standard of living might not be as high as some of our neighbors, but it is so extraordinary compared to almost everybody in the world. Thank you that you have given us all that we need and more left over to use for something bigger and greater than ourselves, but to use as your servants and for your glory and the good of the people around us. I'm still praying if you're here and maybe you've never even taken that first step to connect with Jesus, and this wasn't really a come to Jesus message necessarily exactly, but whether you recognize the wisdom and beauty and truth that he holds, or whether it's something that's been going on this week, or whether it's something you can't even explain, you feel like, yes, this is what I need. It's a very simple situation. Every one of us is a sinner. There have been things that were wrong. We did them anyway, and God, as the ultimate great just judge, can't just pretend that some sort of something wrong didn't happen and ignore it. That would be a terrible unjust judge, and so we have to provide justice, but what can it a created human being do to pay back the God who created them? Of course, nothing at all. But that's why Jesus came, lived a perfect sinless death, and then lived a perfect sinless life. And then his death on the cross was taking our place. That was him satisfying justice before God for our wrongdoing. He takes our sinfulness, we take his righteousness, and we become forgiven, adopted children of God and his family. If that's you, just right where you sit, you can say out loud or even in your heart, or if you're online, pray, say something like, God, I believe that Jesus Christ came and died and resurrected so I could be forgiven and be adopted as a child in your family. Please come into my life. Forgive me and adopt me. Begin to make me into the person you created me to be. And give me the life that you have for me. And it's not the words or the prayer that saves you, it's that you put your faith in Jesus. God's grace comes to you through that, and you are a new spiritual creation. The best thing you can do from here is just let somebody else know you're not created to do it by yourself. If you're here with somebody, tell them. If you can, go out to the point when we're done. That's just the corner of the lobby. Let the person there know the decision you've made, or if you're online, send us a message. We'll be able to follow up with some good, healthy next steps for responding to what God is doing in your heart and your life. For the rest of us, this is going to be a struggle, honestly, for every one of us living in a wealthy society. This is reality. That's just the truth. Will we decide right now between ourselves and God? And the harder this is one of those things. It's like a lot of things, honestly. The harder it is, the more important it is to decide between ourselves and God that we are going to move toward generosity and to break the power of greed in our hearts. I don't care if it's to this church or to some other ministry or to some person on the street. That's not the message for today. The point is to destroy the power of greed in our hearts and in our lives, and to chart a path and a course and cultivate a heart of generosity. And you will be more grateful and fulfilled in that life, which I suspect you know is true, but it doesn't make it easy, I know. Whatever it is between yourself and the Spirit of God, the steps that you know to take, commit to those and becoming more of the person God has created you to be. And Father, we are so grateful that you give us the opportunity, and you've given each one of us such immense power with the resources that you have seen fit to have within our control. Father, will you give each one of us, by your Spirit, the strength and the courage to step forward into those steps that you have for us, to break the power of the ugliness of greed and to be who you've created us to be. In the name of Jesus Christ, amen.